Hey everybody, Paul Sterling here. I am the author of Argue Less, Love More. I have been a relationship coach for about over 25 years, and today we're going to be talking about communication. And I counted the other day, since the pandemic started, I have done about 130 of these Courageous Love shows. And someone who has been a regular viewer is Natalie. And at one point I said, Natalie, how much do you know about NVC? And it's like, she really is a wealth of information and has been studying it for some years now. And I said, well, come on, let's have a conversation and talk about what is it that she knows, what is it that I know. And today we're going to dive in. So grab a piece of paper, a pen. This is not a fluffy conversation. This is a deep dive into what destroys relationships or what makes them remarkable. If you get this stuff right, your relationships get better and better. If you get this wrong, it will destroy a relationship where there's tons of love, intimacy, and all the rest of that. So communication is a key. Natalie, how the hell did you end up stumbling on, we're calling it nonviolent communication. It's the work of Marshall Rosenberg. Marshall, he's no longer with us. He passed away, but his work lives on. And I can look at, Marshall was a turning point in my life. Like, I look at my life before Marshall and after Marshall, and I will be forever grateful for his work and him as a human being courageous. So Natalie, how did you stumble on this work?
Well, thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. I stumbled upon this book, which you just made reference to. And this was Marshall Rosenberg. And it was an amazing turning point in my life as well. So I can relate to what you shared, Paul. It was a point in my life where I needed to find a way to have less angry conversations with another person who happened to be the father of my son. So we had a child together, and we got off to a little rocky start at the beginning. So I'm diving right in. You said this was a deep dive today.
Oh,
so
yeah, totally.
So, you know, I knew that things were a little rocky out of the gates, and I wanted it to be smoother. I wanted communication to be better. And so I started to research what could I do to help solve that problem. And I landed on this book and read this book, Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life by Marshall Rosenberg. I read it like 3 times in the first month. I read it once and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And then I read it again and again. And
so wait, 1 second. I just want people to get that when you stumble on an important work, like a study, you don't read it once. What Natalie said is she read it 3 times. I read things 2, 3 times. If you're serious, it's like, it's a study. It's not something light and fluffy that you just get and then move on. This is a deep dive into something that will transform the way you communicate for the rest of your friggin' life. So pay attention. This shit is not easy. If it was easy, you probably wouldn't be on this call. You could just go do it. So keep going, Natalie. I'm going to interrupt in between, you know, just for clarification.
That's fine. I'm just fine with a little tag teaming back and forth here. So, and you know, just to mention, just to I guess add to what you had just mentioned too, was that you can't go back after you jump into this stuff. You know, you can't go back to where you were before. So if you're really attached to whatever that was, that norm, that you did that was familiar, this is going to take you out of that space.
So quick question here, because nonviolent, some people are going, they're going like, oh, and it was weird to me at first because I'm not violent. I never have hit a partner. I never intend to hit a partner. So what does nonviolent mean?
So it's interesting. That was something that I, paused to kind of better understand when I started to do this work. So it goes beyond just not being physically violent. This has to do with emotions, feelings, needs, interpersonal skills, and needs that exist that when I first started doing this work, the whole grouping of interpersonal skills or needs, I didn't even really know that they existed. It was like a really big aha moment for me when I looked through the needs that was part of this work to just realize, well, are these needs met or not? Well, I didn't even know there were needs to begin with. So I had to take a step back to say, all right, what are the needs and are they met or not, to kind of start becoming more connected with.
Yeah. And for the viewers, by the way, viewers, we would love your comments, questions. Let us know where you're watching from, where in the world, because I get people from all around the world. I have clients in England, India, Australia, Mexico, around the US, Hawaii. Anyway, where are you calling in from? Let us know. And this is interactive. Hey, Kelly, I see you there. And the purpose of communication is to help us get our needs met. And the thing is, if we don't know what our needs are, it's really hard to succeed in relationships. So what Marshall did for me, and it sounds like for you, Natalie, is help set us up to win. If we don't know what our needs are, it's hell hard to get them met, and NVC is that wake-up point. So explain a little bit about what a need is, if you would.
Sure. And I think it's one of my slides speaks to this. If you want to,
do you want me to bring up let me bring up your slides. This is the first one Natalie and I are doing together. So we're coordinating our logistics. I'm in California. She's in Minnesota.
Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah, by Jesus.
Yeah. You might see the background on my wall here. I'm surrounded by, real outdoorsy people, and I'm one of them too. But Yeah,
so. you got a miniature deer there. He was 2 feet tall or something when you.
This is what they sell at the local Target. So welcome to, Kelly from Georgia and other folks that I see in the comments here. I am going to present, I think, my screen. So hopefully you can see me on the first slide. And then I'll go through to, now when I do this, I don't see myself. So hopefully you can still see me.
We see you on the side.
On the side. Okay, wonderful.
But we don't see your screen. We see it says click to exit full screen, but there's nothing showing. Oh, now it said loading. There we see the 4-part communication process.
Wonderful. Okay, I just skipped to this slide because it's relevant to where the conversation went. So,
but we don't see a slide.
You don't see a slide.
No, we just see click to exit full screen. So,
okay. Well, I'm going to speak to the slide unless I can do something else that will help you guys see what this is.
Okay, so hold on. Before you speak to that slide, because I see the 4 parts, I'm going to bounce. I'm going to switch us, remove for a second. I'm going to bring this up. This is the setup for Natalie. I was doing research, and what I want you to think about is how important getting this right is. And the number one problem is communication problems. So I was looking at what are the causes of divorce, and every 33 seconds to 35 seconds, there is a divorce. The average cost is $33,000, and that is the smallest cost of it. The cost of relationships, the kids, the family, the impact. And the challenge here is the number one key to turning things around is communication. Number one problem is communication is basically the catch-22. Have you ever, the more you communicate, the worse things get. And if you're quiet, that doesn't help either. So how many out there have had communication destroy a relationship? So if you've had that, just let us know there in the comments. And then I'm going to bounce it over to Natalie. So what do we do about this communication problem? So here, I'm going to switch and add you to the stream, and there we go. And it shows your slide with you on it, slide number 1.
Slide number 2, what happened when I was 43 years old. So if you can see that one.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll stay in this mode on my screen. You see kind of everything, but you also see my slides. So just don't look to the left and get a sneak peek of what I'm going to say next. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, so what happened when I was 43 years old is what I had introduced at the beginning was this pain point where, I need to figure out a way to communicate in a less angry way. And that's where my journey began, finding that nonviolent communication book by Marshall Rosenberg. One thing I want to share here, and this is what Paul was talking about, some of these pain points. These were probably the top 3 communication issues that were personal pain points for me. So I will be vulnerable here for a few minutes in this respect to share the pain points I experienced that led me deeper into this work. So hopefully this is relevant. It's something that you guys are interested in hearing a little bit more about, but I can share these. And I think they tie in really well with some of the work that you do, Paul, related to some things that can address some of these types of issues too, that I also did find with some of the nonviolent communication work. So number 1, crowdsourcing support for your side through social media. Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well.
God, I'm gonna switch so you can. They might not be able to see the slides, but I want them to see you, and you know those slides because the slides are small print anyway. But okay, crowdsourcing, or what did you say? Crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing support for your side through social media.
Oh, I know it well. So explain an example. Go ahead.
Yeah, so example, you and another person have a conflict. You're not in agreement on something and you're not coming to terms and it's causing pain. And one or both go out to Facebook to try to phone a friend or 200 of them to join your team. Well, you're only one and I have 200 people that agree with me, so you're wrong. This thing that is problematic in the time of social media. So I'm sharing it as, one of 3 top communication pain points because it really was a pain point for me. And it was something that's relevant to what's going on in our world today about how we communicate. And it can be utilized in it's a downward spiral really quick in disconnecting.
So one of the things to tie into that, we're going to go back and forth on that. It's one of the mistakes. So if people have read the book, one of the first mistakes I talk about or triggers is something called case building. And that's exactly what you're talking about. I'm building a case and I'm gathering evidence and a lot of people agree with my case. In fact, it's wonderful how many people think you're an ass, which is this is not a bonding experience. You know, that when you get on social media and start asking for advice, and a lot of times you're getting advice from people who are triggered and not trained.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
And people like to engage. They like to share. They want to be on the winning team too. So if a lot of people are sharing and they're agreeing, then it tends to snowball a bit more, it seems like.
Yeah, and another quick factor in here, and then we'll dive on to your number 2 or whatever, is today a friend of mine got a hold of, she got a hold of me a couple of weeks ago and said, can you help me move? And so I helped her and her partner move today, and I've moved a lot. So I'm a very experienced mover, but they also got a guy help who's a professional mover. There's a difference between somebody who's moved a lot and somebody who's a professional mover. And it's a lot of people have been in relationships and they've talked a lot, but they're not a professional communicator. They haven't studied communication. And so we're trying to help people go from being just someone who's moved a lot, like that was me. But having the professional packer and mover there made a world of difference. Like how fast we got the truck packed, how well it went unpacking. It's like there is a difference between somebody who's trained in communication and somebody who talks a lot.
That's a perfect segue into my pain point number 2, if I might dive into that one, number 2. So number 2, lack of awareness about whose feelings we're empathizing with and an imbalance or absence of mutual empathy. There was a lot in that pain point number 2. So just to kind of unpack that for just a moment here, when we're talking about empathy, it's really important to know who we're empathizing with at the moment. And being present with another person because they're going through something and empathizing with them is one thing, connecting with your own feelings is another thing. But I find that the ambiguity about whose feelings are we even empathizing with right now at this moment is something that people are sometimes unaware of. I was somewhat unaware of that as well. It was like, well, who are we empathizing with? And sometimes it's imbalanced, or there's an absence of the back and forth, which is part of the communication piece. You know, that's so essential.
So what you're saying is so critical, and it's people think like, oh, that's easy. I get it. It's not. No, it's not easy. And a metaphor that I use around that is like if you're driving the car and I reach over and start trying to steer. It's like, okay, who's in the driver's seat? Who's in the passenger seat? Who's giving and who's receiving? Now, here's where it gets a little challenging. If I want to give you a gift, the most precious gift I can give is listening and feeding it back, giving you empathy. So it's like deciding in advance, just exactly what you said. I'm just re-emphasizing who's going to give, who's going to receive. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be so critical to making it go smoother.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So pain point number 3. So I have 3. I experience pain beyond 3. This is so just to know for people listening in, you know, there's bigger issues here, but these are the top 3 that really came up with a significant amount of pain for me. So the third one, pain point number 3, is a fixed mindset that's not open to growth, both individually and mutually. So what I'm talking about here is just like being open to growing, being open to growing together, being open to growing in different ways. You know, and one of the examples for me was related to being successful professionally, but having my personal communication piece kind of lagging behind and not realizing that one was doing really, really well. And the other one, as far as the personal communication was, needed a little bit of a little boost. So there was like an assumption on my part that like I was a good communicator because that's what I heard at work. But then it came to the personal piece of like, wow, like this empathy, exchanging empathy, learning how to know when to listen and when to speak and to communicate and have that as that exchange, that dance between two, was something that was really important. That was painful to learn. Well,
do you speak any other languages, Natalie?
Not really. I've taken some foreign language classes, but I couldn't speak them fluently.
So here's the trick or the challenge here is that sometimes we use the same language very differently. So when we're communicating in the business world, there are 3 places we communicate from. Okay, we communicate from the head, from the heart, and from our hurt. Our hurt is like our reptile brain. So in our reptile brain, we get very narrowly focused. We're trying to figure out who's the enemy, who's the ally. From our heart, it's the language of love, LOL, but not laughing out loud. It's the language of love. It's the language of feelings and needs. And see, that is the language of relationships. And at work, a lot of times we're using the language of the mind, logic, reason, who's right, who's wrong, fix the problem, what's the problem. You know, I don't care about your fucking feelings. Excuse me if you're easily offended out there in the Facebook world, but look, grow up. There we go. There's my So, but it's like, see, it's so interesting. We can be really successful here. Like I was a successful captain of a boat, you know, 80-foot commercial fishing boat in Alaska. And I would come home and think that the same tools I used to get my crew to do what they, you know, did and would work with my wife, or let me say ex-wife. And it didn't. It was a whole new thing. So how did you kind of go through that one? I'm just riffing on your original thing there.
Yeah, it's good. This is and it'll lead into this 4 parts NVC communication piece I can speak to next. But this is, you know, this piece here was kind of what you were saying about, you know, like it didn't work when you transferred. And actually in the professional or the business world, having feelings was almost considered unprofessional. You know, right. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but it really did feel like it. It felt like it wasn't the place to share your emotions.
Certain feelings are actually embraced in the world of business and certain feelings are not. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy to be in the sort of male-dominated, aggressive, angry feelings, kick ass, get shit done, but having what might be considered the softer feelings, like that hurt my feelings, so that disappointed me, or that was, you know, I'm scared. Those feelings, not so okay in the world of business. And they weren't okay in my family. My dad was pretty tough Irish alcoholic, recovering Catholic. He could have a great heart, but boy, he could be pretty judgmental. Mm-hmm. So dive back in, and you were having great success in business, and then but not at home.
Yeah, it wasn't really working. It was, you know, well, how come I'm not doing a good job? I thought I was good at this communication thing, you know, and what I was good at was talking, like you shared. As far as the interdependence piece, that was one of the very early aha moments for me in nonviolent communication. And this is going to make more sense once I talk about the 4 parts and I talk about this piece. But, you know, there are a number of needs related to interdependence and how that dance works between 2 people that are critically important to good communication.
So I'm bringing up a slide before I bring your slides back up. This is the communication catch-22 that you're kind of talking about. Einstein said we can't solve problems using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And I just crossed that off and modified his thing to say we can't solve problems by using the same kind of communication we used when we created them. So what Natalie's about to introduce us to is a model of communication. And for a lot of you, you're going to go, that's not normal. That's not the way I normally communicate. Well, no shit. If you wanted normal communication, you'd get normal results. Mm-hmm. The problem is normal communication has kept us at war for I don't know how many years. The way we communicate with each other is often painful and brutal. And that's why it's learning a model of communication to set you up to succeed. So Natalie, dive into introducing us to the 4 steps. And I'm going to sneak off for a second and close the door over there. So you talk.
Okay, thanks, Paul. All right, so hello, everyone. So the slide that hopefully you're seeing on the screen, and if not, I'll describe this as well, is the 4-part nonviolent communication process. And this was developed by Marshall Rosenberg. And this is a way of communicating. I find it to be a really successful and effective way of communicating. These are steps that are based on clearly expressing how I am without blaming or criticizing, and empathetically receiving how you are without hearing blame or criticism. That was one sentence, but there is a whole lot wrapped into that one sentence. So there's 4 parts to it. And I'll just spend a little time, I guess, on each part, maybe, Paul, and feel free to let me know if I should approach that differently or if you'd like to jump in along the way.
Well, yeah, because what I want to do is like, as you explain them so that we move from the head to the heart, let's give them an example of what an observation is, what a feeling is, what the need. So okay. Go ahead and dive in.
Okay, so number 1 is observation without judgment or criticism. So, and there's, I guess, blame could be tied into that too. So observation, the door is open. Who left the door open? There's like a difference there. Maybe, I don't know if that's the best example, but observation is describing something you see, hear, feel without tying judgment to it.
Well, I can give the judgmental side of the door.
Okay.
You don't care about whether my Facebook Live works well or not. You left the door open.
Oh, there you go. And this is relevant to, I was giving an example that was maybe like tied into the experience of being on the call tonight. So I did keep talking, Paul. Okay. So yeah, it's and in nonviolent communication, it takes a lot of practice to do step one. This in itself is foundational to the other 3 steps. So
and the key here is vulnerability. What we're trying to do, when I looked at NVC, we're trying to take our inner world and bring it out so another person can hear us, understand us, and value us. So it's, the work of Brene Brown is super valuable, all about vulnerability. And nonviolent communication is a way of being courageously vulnerable and getting away from, I was brought up in a super judgmental family, and I grew up learning that was a powerful way to communicate. My dad used to say the best defense is a strong offense. So we had lots of offensive communication around the dining room table at night. So observations, what's the next one there?
So the next one is feelings. And when you start nonviolent communication, and is referenced in the Nonviolent Communication book by Rosenberg, is a feelings list at the end of the book. This is really helpful because sometimes people have happy and sad. And then you look and you see the list of feelings and you're like, wow, that's a really long list. And then you read to say, this is just a really small, brief list of a few of the feelings. And then you realize that there's an even longer list. So this is really was a little bit eye-opening to just even look at that. And by the way, Facebook, when you go to a feeling on Facebook, it's they're not even all feelings, which is kind of interesting.
What's the difference between feelings and judgments?
Well, okay, so feelings you're going to talk about, well, you have a feeling when what's the difference between feelings and judgment?
I'll set you up a little better than that. I'll give you a couple of examples and you can just tell people whether they're feelings or not.
Okay.
I feel that you don't care about me.
Oh, that's a judgment.
Yeah. So what would the feeling be, people? If you think about it, what's the feeling? If I think that Natalie doesn't care about me, what do I feel? I might feel sad. I might feel disappointed. I might feel hurt. So it's like there's surface layer and there's a deeper layer. I feel manipulated.
Not a feeling. Yeah.
I feel judged.
Not a feeling again.
So what we want to do is, if you can go to the next layer, see, when I say I feel judged, it's about somebody else at some level. I feel abandoned. Now, see, you can get a lot of traction for that supposed feeling. And it's a story I tell myself. When I think I'm abandoned, how do I feel? I might feel, again, sad, disappointed. All right, so I just was dancing with you there, Natalie. I hand it back to you. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is just to kind of tie part number 1 and part number 2 together for people who might be watching this and learning about nonviolent communication for the first time. Step number 2 in feelings, how I feel, insert the emotion. So, sad when I observe you are leaving without saying goodbye, or whatever, something like that, So I feel sad when you leave without saying goodbye. It could be tied to like that I feel abandoned, but this practice is to connect with that feeling of what, I feel sad or lonely or disappointed or whatever, when this observation, I observed you left without saying goodbye.
And then it ties into the third thing.
Yes. So again, you might have expected that the list of needs is lengthy as well. So needs are going to be basic needs, basic human needs. Needs do not conflict with each other. So if you have a need, another person has a need, you don't have to duke it out to figure out whose need is going to get met. The practice of nonviolent communication is to figure out, first of all, connect with the needs that you have that are met or unmet, and then also connect with the needs another person has that are met or unmet. But a key point here is that we are responsible for meeting our own needs. So I should pause. Then Paul, feel free to jump in.
And part of the challenge here, one of the other catch-22 here, is that in our culture we have a lot of needs shame. So it's when our needs are met and feel like they're being treated as if they're precious, the relationship is in great shape. When our needs feel like a burden and are ignored, we're in shitty shape. And the challenge is we don't have a good vocabulary around needs, and we're ashamed of actually bringing them up and talking about them. So that is one of the key things here. And I can switch back over, this is that slide again, the observations, feelings, needs, and the key thing, and we'll go back and forth with Natalie and me, but what causes the feelings that at least I got from learning from Marshall Rosenberg is Natalie didn't cause the feeling. What caused the feeling is my need was either being met or not being met. Mm-hmm. All right, so Absolutely. I'm handing it back to you.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's good insight because, I draw on Marshall Rosenberg's work a lot, and I think of these different excerpts that he shares in his book. And I also should mention that I have taken for 3 years, and it's a 52-week course through the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication, the Compassion course from Tom Bond. So as I think of mentors who I haven't met, but who have been highly influential in my work in this nonviolent communication process, is not only Marshall Rosenberg, but Tom Bond in New York, who teaches what Marshall Rosenberg teaches as well too. Whereas I draw some of these different examples from. I hear him speaking in my head when I say some of these things. So I have to give a nod to some of that training that's coming through in my responses. So I want to make sure I recognize that as well. So.
Yeah, and one other, I just want people to get an idea. This is, I've said this already today, this is not the normal way we communicate. If you want normal, you're going to get the results you normally get, which is a divorce rate of 55 to 65%. Every 33 seconds, there's another divorce happening. That's what's normal. This is not normal. But it's super powerful. I have taught this to prison inmates, and I have taught this almost the exact same course to professors at Naropa University. So it's this common way of communicating. So back to you, Natalie. Do you want to bounce on the fourth part of this and we can give some examples?
Sure. I was going to say, shut the front door. I'll take on the next 4 in the 4-part series. All right, so we've observed the door has been left open. We feel sad because someone left. Our need potentially for connection, closeness, consideration, these are some needs that might have been unmet and the reason why we might have felt sad. So then that brings us to number 4, which is the request. So number 4 is to clearly request that which would enrich my life without demanding. So here's the tricky part. You need to be open to accepting yes or no to the request as the response. This is the tricky part. We're not good at accepting no as a response, but it is respecting someone else's autonomy to be able to answer yes or no, or it's a demand. So this is number 4 is a request, not a demand.
So put your hands together like this, everybody. We can see you, and Natalie, play along with me because I'll use you for. So when I say go, what I want you to do is press really hard with your right hand. And we're watching you out there in Facebook land. We can see you. So ready, get set, go. Press really hard with your right hand. No, press harder, press harder. Okay, stop pressing. All right, so Natalie, I use you. Where are your hands?
They're in front of me, but
basically in the same spot, right?
Yeah, they never.
What did I say? Press really hard with your.
Well, with my right hand, my left hand pushed back.
Why?
I don't know.
I've done this literally with thousands of people, and that's normally the response. But here's the underlying idea behind it. As soon as we feel force, what do?
Push back.
We push back. And see, that's the thing Natalie was just covering. If it feels like a demand, we resist. So it's like the art form of communication is, how do you make requests that don't feel like demands? And see, it gets really hard. And Natalie, I wanted to ask you more about this, but like with your kids or with your partner, or if you're scared or jealous, how do you make a request that doesn't get perceived as a demand? Kids around who they're going to hang out with, doing their homework, dealing with drugs, dealing with when they're going to be sexually active. I mean, there's like this whole plethora that a parent goes through of how to communicate with their child without it feeling like a demand, because as soon as you make a demand, there is either visible or invisible resistance. Mm-hmm. So can you give us any examples in that world? Because I know you're a single mom dealing with a young man, I believe it is. And
yes, I have a rambunctious youngster, and he has a lot of energy, as a young person might have. He is 5, so he's very young. But one of the things that we do in our home is we do have a poster it's a feelings poster with different pictures of kids with different feelings. And we did start with cards that had feelings and needs when he was very young, because I started doing this practice and I started teaching him. What is interesting, because I started that really early, is that I can refer him to the board, which is, I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad or whatnot. It's a way of parenting, I suppose. But we do have the board, and we have a calming bottle. And so there's the calming bottle that helps us kind of like.
So wait, slow down. A calming bottle? A
calming bottle. So we have a bottle that has filled with like cornstarch and food coloring and sparkles. And so it moves slowly. So, if we're having a highly emotional moment, which there are lots of when you have a child, is like we've kind of done this practice where we get the calming bottle to come present with the fact that we need to calm down. Like some emotions are kind of a little bit crazy right now, and we got to figure out what they are. So I don't know, an example.
So wait, while you're working on your example, I want to get people to like catch up with where we were. Okay. I talked about communicating from your head, your heart, or your hurt. When you're in your reptile brain, you're triggered and you don't have access to a lot of these things. So the calming bottle, whatever it is, and one of the guys a friend of mine, my roommate, is a guy who runs Love Coach Academy, a guy named Scott Katamas. He talks about this. If you're in a good, really resourceful green light, if you need caution, you're starting to get triggered. It's yellow light. And if you're really triggered, it's red light, just stop. And so it's like, how do you get back into your heart from your reptile brain? So you have the calming bottle. Scott has the red light, yellow light, green light, slow it down. If it's yellow light, I'm starting to get triggered. I want to know that my connection with you is more important than the conversation. Mm. And so it's not about the content of the conversation, it's about our connection. We need to slow down because I'm starting to get in my reptile brain. Once I'm in my reptile brain, I do not have access to all this shit I've learned about feelings and needs. Mm-hmm. And all I think about is enemy, ally, is this safe? So again, how's this tie in with your 5-year-old?
Yeah, the other thing with a 5-year-old is that, like I feel like a volcano seems to be relevant. because he loves volcanoes, but he knows they erupt, and that like I feel like a volcano, which is not a feeling. We just went over feelings, but it's I guess it's just kind of like the volcano imagery helps us know that we need to go to the calming bottle. So there's this thing where like, and maybe actually this brings to light the fact that I can work a little bit more on what the feeling is versus I feel like a volcano. But neither here nor there, that's the connecting back with the calming bottle. But it's very clear when we're in a space where it's very highly emotional, it's triggered for me, for him, for both of us. And there's no chance that we're going to, even if we looked at the list of feelings, we're not going to get to, like mad, anger. We're angry. Like that's really the one thing that then comes up because we're triggered. And, one of the things in nonviolent communication that I've learned is that anger is a layered emotion, and that if you're angry or you feel angry, then you have to kind of, come back and unpack what that actually is underneath. I don't know if I answered your question, Paul, but it's kind of about our process. It's like I feel like this process is kind of with a child. It's calming down to connect with that, and even as a parent, like I just remember if things are getting emotional and we have big emotions. That's a lot of the time we talk about big emotions, and kids are trying to learn how to deal with that, to just empathize. If I pause and just empathize, it changes the way that he feels. It seems to. It seems like we've calmed down a little bit, and it might be, the lack of a need being met to be heard, or whatever is triggering, that's causing this big emotion. So, yeah, that's one of the things I just have to remember as a parent.
Yeah, and what you did is so brilliant, because it's like if someone, it's setting people up to win in the conversation, and if they're not resourceful, it's unlikely they're going to win or you're going to win, that they can hear you. And having a board there, like I love the idea of having a whiteboard or whatever color board you want with, here's the observation, feelings, needs. So you can just go point, ugh, how am I feeling when I am in, and I have this here as a reminder, when I'm in my reptile brain, I'm having a hard time even thinking about feelings and needs. So maybe just going up and pointing to it and saying that. Mm-hmm. And because, see, going all the way back to the beginning of nonviolence, what I understand from Marshall, violent communication is when I'm trying to get my needs met without caring about whether it meets your needs. I'm using force, whatever it is. And it is especially there when, I'm going to do this delicately, but when there's a power differential, like at work, boss, employee, power differential. Mm-hmm. And so a boss can think I'm being very great and making requests, and employees hear it as a demand. Parent, kid, requests can feel like a demand. And actually, even though we're working on women's equality and all the rest of it, masculine can feel like a bully over the feminine, because masculine tends to be stronger and use more force. And it's something that men have to just be aware of. Like, I'm a big guy, I have a loud voice, and my ex-partner could have felt bullied just because I'm not bullying, I'm just speaking loudly. But at 6'3" and 230 pounds, I look intimidating. So it's this dance we're doing with this power differential.
Mm-hmm. It's an excellent point, as far as that goes, whether it's, gender and physical appearance, or, for example, age, like parent and child. There's a clear, someone's going to have the last say in what happens next, as a parent. I wanted to just mention that, we've covered parenting and personal a little bit, and then a professional, related to work experience. When I started doing nonviolent communication related to work, at first, again, it was kind of like, well, that business world, they don't really do feelings. But you know what was really helpful is that once I started practicing nonviolent communication and checking in with my own feelings and checking in with myself, my feelings and my needs, that will help me figure out a request and making the request, that was when all of a sudden I needed to do that other part, which is empathizing with the other person. Now, they don't necessarily have to know you're even doing this, but if they're having a conversation with you, like a boss is telling you something, or you're making a request to your boss and maybe they're not giving you the answer you wanted to hear, you can empathize with them to check in with how you think that they might be feeling, what they might be needing, and what was standing between them saying yes, between that question you asked, making the request, and saying yes, what was standing in the way there, and maybe checking in to just like figure out what might be the hang up there.
So what I want to do is I want to ask people what they're getting from this conversation. How would your relationship be different, or how different would it have been if you were able to talk about the observation, like what happened, the feelings you had or they had, the needs that were either being met or not being met, and making clear requests rather than demands? How different would your relationship have been, or would be now, or maybe in the future? I know I've been a relationship coach for over 25 years, and I've gone through 1 divorce and 4 broken engagements. So there was a strong learning curve for me around this. This is simple to say, but hard to do, especially when you're in the reptile brain. So what I'd love to hear, what are you getting from this, and how would your life be different? So Natalie, any other examples of, or maybe we could even do an example here.
Well, I think that I had one other comment to make, but I don't know that it's a specific example, but I could jump in.
Make your comment and then we'll dive into an example.
Okay, well, that'll give people a chance to type into the comments. So
yeah.
Listen to what I'm saying too, if you would like to.
If you would like to listen to what I say. Now, see, it's fun to actually see. You get a lot of freedom when it's like you're going to let what Marshall used to call it, let the jackals roar. It's like, I'm going to be demanding right now. Is that okay? And it's like, yeah, it's okay. Do the demanding.
So that's an example of maybe where I could have approached that a little bit differently. But so the point I wanted to make was about where I had mentioned that needs don't conflict. So you're checking in with yourself about what your feelings are, what your needs are, and then other people are maybe checking in with themselves about how they feel and what they need, and you're listening back and forth. The conflict often arises in how to resolve that, how to come to terms.
Yeah.
The strategy piece. So you can feel free to express how you feel, what you need, and make requests, but know that you're going to get maybe some yeses, some nos, and that how that's handled is where the conflict typically is. So feel free to express your feelings and needs, because they don't conflict with one another. I thought that was really kind of an aha moment for me in this work.
So and by the way, we just got a question. Is this hosted here, or is this a replay? So this is a fancy replay. No, it's not a replay. At least right now, it's live. And thank you. And I don't even know how to say that name. Austrian Deluxe. Hopefully I didn't butcher it too badly. I'm going to give an example, because if you want to be successful, you learn how to communicate with other people. If you want to be happy, you learn how to communicate with yourself. So the things we're learning from Natalie and from Marshall, not only can you apply them in the outer world, you can apply them in the inner world. And I will give a quick example of that, and then I want to hear some more examples from you. But at one point, I was back with my father, and he was really sick at the time. He was dying. He had asbestosis, so the hardening of the artery. It's basically you slowly suffocate because your body cannot absorb oxygen anymore. And this is like a tough contractor, badass guy. Anyway, we're watching TV, and we're watching the news, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict comes on, and I say, I'm really proud of the work Marshall's doing with the Palestinians and the Israelis and nonviolent communication. And my dad, who really, as much as he was a badass, he was also a liberal his whole life, and his protested wars, whenever it's like hippie liberal, somewhat judgmental alcoholic. Anyway, an odd combination. So he looks at me and he goes, if Marshall was making a difference, it would be on TV. And I'm like, first place, it's not anything our family has ever believed that you get reality from TV. It's not even the news. Anyway, and I was in shock and I went silent. And normally when our family, when you're going silent, you're thinking of the good comeback. And what happened in my mind is I went, and at first the jackals ran wild, and maybe we'll talk about that. But the judgmental side, it's like, why is my dad such an asshole? How come he can never say anything nice? Da, 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 da. And then I looked inside and went, wow, I'm really upset. What precious need of mine wasn't getting met? Oh, I have a need for respect and for contribution and acknowledgement. And it's like, as soon as I gave myself that understanding, I started to calm down. And I realized I'm feeling really sad right now, disappointed, because I want my dad to be proud of me. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about it, and then I looked and I went, wow. Once I got empathy, there was this huge opening for me to enter his world. Mm-hmm. Until then, there was no room. And once I gave myself empathy, I go wonder what's happening for my dad. And I thought about it. I said, oh my God, he knows he's dying. And he spent most of his adult life trying to make a difference, protesting, doing stuff, trying to make a contribution. And we're watching the news, and the news looks the same from 30 years before. The conflict is still going on. And so when I opened my mouth, and he was expecting probably the comeback that we would normally do. And instead I leaned into his world. I guess, Dad, I'm wondering if you feel really sad and disappointed right now because you're watching the news, and the news doesn't seem to have changed since, in the last 30 years. There's still war. The environment is still getting hammered, these major issues. And it was like, he looked at me like, where is my son? Who is this alien talking to me? And it transformed. It really, it was so precious, the difference in our communication at the end. He was still angry and caustic and stuff like that. And it's like, I watched myself not go into reaction. I watched myself be able to be with him in a totally different way. So that's an example. And what kind of an impact does it make in your relationships if you're able to do that? So anything else? Cool. For me, it was useful to learn yellow light and red signs, easier to relate to it when things get hot. Yeah, it's really important. So any last, because we're at 54 minutes now, that I normally, this is like almost starting to wrap up, and it's been awesome. Is there any sort of closing thing? And I know you wanted to cover a lot more, so did I.
Well, this is wonderful. And I just wanted to reflect back something about what you just shared. I was inspired to hear your story. And I feel like that you opened up the highway to the heart. I mean, that just was something that was really cool. And I appreciate that you shared that.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a big deal. It's a challenge. And normal communication is not what I want anymore. And if people walk away from this, what I want people to think about is, am I communicating from my head? I'll say it differently. Am I talking from my head, my heart, or my hurt? Am I listening? When I'm listening to you, if I'm listening from my head, I'm listening for what are the facts, what are the figures, who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad, what are we going to do about it, what's the problem we're going to fix. If I'm listening from my heart, I'm listening for, is this an act of love or a cry for help? What precious feelings and needs does Natalie have right now? What's the beautiful request? You know, and by the way, guys who are watching, women too, but if you want to make your partner melt, ask her about her precious needs, because so many women have been taught and conditioned to not have needs, or actually to pretend that they don't have needs, because otherwise they are needy and not desirable. And it's like how to make friends with your needs. And for you guys too, how to make friends with your needs. Mm-hmm. So anything else, and then I'm going to tell people about next steps if possible. So
sounds good. I have 2 closing comments, I think, here. Yeah. One is thank you for having me on the show, Paul, and for people who are tuning in or listening to the replay. So it's wonderful to have this conversation about nonviolent communication. And the slide I put up, I don't know if I'm still in slide mode or if
no, yeah, I will put the slide up. Just tell me. There you go.
Okay, so there it is. So I just put a picture up. I am the mother of a rambunctious 5-year-old and just graduated with my BA in sociology. And the picture on the screen is a picture of us at graduation. And I also put up my Instagram account. If anyone wants to connect in that way, that's kind of one of the ways I like to connect with people who are interested in doing this work or hearing about the North Woods of Minnesota. You do get a lot of that on my page. So one closing comment related to nonviolent communication is it's all about connection. You know, if there's one thing that you might take away with you from this conversation tonight is if you can focus on the connection, it makes a world of difference. So, thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And what I'd love to do is hear from anybody out there what they got from me or from Natalie. Just type it in, because one of the precious needs that Marshall introduced me to is a need to contribute, to grow, to contribute, to make a difference. And like when I spent 8.5 years, I created a program for teaching nonviolent communication. I call it compassionate communication and changing your beliefs in prison. So once a month I would go in and teach there. And that met my need to contribute. And I'll just give you one moment of that. I was working with the men's side. I worked with men's side, women's side, minimum security to maximum security. And so this group that come in, and I'm in there 2 days with each group, and I go in once a month. So I'm in with this group, and the second day they come in, and they're in gray outfits, gray suits. And when I go in, I would just tell the jail, here's the days I have. You pick out who you want me to see. So I never knew who I was going to see, whether men or women, minimum, maximum security. They come in the second day. We'd already spent a day together bonding. And they come in, and they're in gray outfits. And I'm curious. One of the guys walking in, I said, what does gray mean? He goes, maximum security. And I just went, but we were so connected, the group and me. And it's like they said, wow, what happened to you? Because you just went into reaction. I go, yeah, I totally got triggered there for a second. I stopped seeing you as people and started seeing you as inmates. And I'm back. It's okay. And in those 8.5 years, I never had an upset with that group, you know, with any of the groups I worked with, because I always saw them as human beings. And we connected. I treated them with respect and appreciation. So one of the guys, that maximum security group, one of the guys is leaving after the second day, and he stops. And when I'm in a prison or a jail, I've heightened like senses, and he starts backing up, and he's coming back up to me, and it's like I go, okay, what's going on? And he gets right to me, and he looks over and he goes, Paul, if I had learned this stuff in high school, I wouldn't have spent 20 years in prison. If I had learned this stuff in high school, I wouldn't have spent 20 years in prison. And I look at a waste of a huge part of somebody's life. And I look at my parents got a divorce after 18 years, and they loved each other. A painful divorce is not one where you stop loving each other. That's an easy divorce. A painful divorce is when you still love each other, but you can't get along. That the problems are bigger than your skill set. So what I want to do is ask people, what are you going to do? Here it is. You have 3 options. You probably have more, but option number 1 is you watch this and you can do nothing. You can do the hope and pray. And there's nothing wrong with hope or praying, but if you hope and pray that your tooth cavity goes away, probably not going to work. If you hope and pray that your relationship's suddenly going to improve by itself, probably not going to work. It's another way of self-sabotaging yourself. The second option you can have is to do it myself. Now, since I was 17 years old, I was a badass commercial fisherman in Alaska, and we were taught, do it yourself. I am going to do the John Wayne here. I'm going to figure this stuff out myself. Now, part of the figuring out myself was divorce number 1 and a couple of broken engagements. And it's like, if you want to turn decades into days, this is what Tony Robbins taught me. I used to work for Tony. If you want to turn decades into days, get a mentor, get somebody that can make a difference. Like if you look at Marshall Rosenberg, he has transformed thousands of people's lives. Natalie talked about him. I talk about him. He made such a huge difference. So if you really want to turn your relationship around, get a mentor, learn the content, get coaching, find a community, learn and grow. If this is something you want to do and you think I can help, get a hold of me. You can join my Facebook group. And I'm going to put a link up there so you can hopefully find us. Here's several different options. You can join the Facebook group called the Courageous Love Show group, and you'll find 130 of these videos here. So you can binge watch. If you're going to binge watch anything, binge watch something that's going to make a difference in your life. The second thing you can do is if you want to turn your relationship around, I work with jealousy, with broken agreements, communication issues, financial issues, all the relationship challenges, and help people go from crisis, that 911 area, crisis and conflict, and move up to good and great. And that takes time. Relationships are not easy. They're a struggle, they're a challenge, they're confusing, they take tons of courage. So if you want to turn your relationship around, or if you're single and want to get relationship ready, get a hold of me. We'll spend about 15 minutes together and we'll find out what are the roadblocks and what do you need to do to turn things around. So that's my Facebook Messenger link right there. And you can find out what, get a hold of me and I'll send you the link to sign up for a free session, or I'll get you the information on how to join the Facebook group. So Natalie, any closing thing before we bounce out of here?
There's so much to learn about nonviolent communication, but I think probably the closing comment would be that it's a practice. And I've been doing this practice for 4 years, and I continue to do this practice. And I'm continuing to learn new aha moments, have new breakthroughs, because you're always in a new place once you grow. Then you can look at this information and do this practice. So it's a practice, and it's worthwhile. And
yeah,
it's really enriched my life and made my life much more full.
Yeah, and if you look at anybody who's committed to their health, they work out at least 3 or 4 times a week, almost daily. When do you get to the place where you're in shape and you don't have to go to the gym again? You don't. When do you get to stop working on your relationship? You don't. So my closing thought is, if you want a remarkable relationship, you need remarkable relationship skills. If you want remarkable relationship skills, find yourself a mentor or more mentors. I have had so many mentors in my life that have transformed my life. Marshall Rosenberg is one of them. Tony Robbins, another one. Byron Katie, another one. These are all people that are masters. So if your relationship is worth saving, get off your ass and do something about it. All right. That's subtle, isn't it? Right? All right. Thank you so much. If we said something that resonates with you, leave us a comment. And if there's somebody you think who needs this information, tag them and they can watch the replay. All right, everybody. Thank you. Have a great day. This is the Courageous Love Show, Sundays at 4:05, Thursdays at 6:05. We'll probably have Natalie back on and some future date. Ciao, everybody. Thanks, Natalie.